there were no Macs there. I don't think there were any Macs actually on campus. There was the only computer that could handle video editing was in like either accounting or HR. It was like an office building. It was like not Hendrix. So I went in and they had like an old version of, I think it was like the third version of Premiere or something. It was very early and it continually crashed. It crashed. Like I could work a total of 2 minutes and then it would crash. And then like 5 minutes, and then crash. And so it just took, and I didn't know how to use Premiere or anything. It was just me plugging away at it. So a lot of it was, there was no equipment, there was no tripods. It was just me going and buying random stuff at the hardware store and then saving it together and be like, I wonder if this is going to turn into something. And that's why the titles all look the way they do. It's because like I
Yeah.
was using Premiere from 2004, so
I Yeah, you had to use what you had to use.
yeah.
But yeah, I really like the way that how natural the interviews feel. Like it doesn't even feel like you were interviewing them. Like it really feels like you just like showed up to their house and like said, "Tell me like your life story." And but also, and it makes me think of your Tell Me a Memory series because watched that like last summer,
Oh,
and
cool.
I love it so much
Thank you
because
for
they're all very natural interviews and just lovely people, and like you seem like you really know how to like get to know a person in just a short amount of
thank
time,
you.
which is really an awesome thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so it's been 16 years since you made the film. So how do you feel about Pink Houses today? Like how do you think it holds up? I mean, I guess we already talked about this in terms of representation and in terms of how Conway has changed, but
Yeah,
maybe and you could talk about in terms of like your work and your career.
totally. I think there's some films that you kind of just make for yourself, and I think Pink Houses. Oh, and this touches on some of the earlier question. Pink Houses was kind of one of those films where I really wanted to figure out. There, I mean, there wasn't. There's maybe like Will and Grace. I think that was on, and
Mm,
there are a few queer characters that you could see in media, but for the most part, like there just wasn't as many people, at least in my circles, that were really out, and I could get to know. And so for me, this was kind of an excuse to like get to know gay people, you know, and and so in terms of looking at back on my career, like there's definitely things where like, wow, I could that was that it feels much older, and it's like, it's like it feels like I made it for $400, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I think the intent and as a document is it still holds up in terms of following two people's lives and documenting these people that at the time I never thought they'd be, by the time I was in my late 30s that they'd be dead. I didn't think that was going to be like
yeah.
that just wasn't part of my consciousness. And now it's like, oh, I'm glad that there's just this document. And it may not be the prettiest document, the sound may not be very good, but there's still this thing that exists, and that's 50 minutes that tells about these two men that didn't move to San Francisco, didn't move to New York City, and stuck around in Little Rock or in Conway and Little Rock, and try to change that a little bit. And to see that, I think that's what the value is for me in terms of in terms of it being a film. I think there's obviously things I look back on it now and say, oh wow, I can't believe you guys just watched 50 minutes of it. But like, I think the content and who those guys are and represent and what they mean to Conway, I cherish that as a document. And I remember when we first showed it at Hendrix, I don't think we'd ever really shown, because I was one of the first people to make this little movie. I think we showed it in what is now, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the museum. It was like a Murphy house, maybe. It was like
The
a house in the middle of the in
Yeah,
the middle of the
yeah.
campus. Yeah. And that was brand new. At the time, that was like day
Oh,
one. Yeah, like, and you had to reserve it, and only like super big speakers got to go in there, and it was like very bougie.
they
And
have
I was,
classes in there now and everything.
oh, okay, yeah. So no, it was like, oh wow, I'm gonna get to show. So we showed a screening there, and we only thought like 50 people would show up, and there was like 100 and something people that showed up. And I remember that the people, like classmates and other people we never really had a conversation about like queer rights or activism or any of those things. Some people were just really taken aback by just the prejudice in the movie, because their world didn't have those characters in it, and so it was interesting to see what the power of just like local, regional, mission-based storytelling can do to kind of a group of people's thoughts, because it was like they knew them. They come to Campus Kitty. They were judges for Campus Kitty in the past, and so they kind of knew them, but they never knew the whole story about them. So
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, I think that for me, it's still a document on some shows the importance of local filmmaking and mission-based filmmaking, and not everything has to be a like a big time Netflix show, right? You can have local communities.
It's definitely eye-opening because I always think about how living at Hendrix, it's like living in a bubble kind of because it's so in many ways it's like so different from the rest of the community. Like I don't even consider myself a part of the rest of the community, but I should.
It's a very interesting. Conway's an interesting space too, because at the time, I don't know if it's still true there, but you couldn't have liquor, and it was a whole different. Like it was a very conservative town when we
Yeah.
were making it. It was still a dry county.
Yeah, but I appreciate your film so much because it was kind of like my introduction to Robert and John, and I don't think I would have known about them. And even though they're long past, like they're long gone, this film is still available for people to know about their history and about how they kind of changed Arkansas in a way, which I think is really powerful. And I think that's how your film really holds up. And no matter if you said you only had $400 to make it, and that doesn't even matter. The fact that it was low budget, the content of it just holds up so well, and it's really inspiring and powerful.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. I appreciate it. I do. It's really nice.
But we have a couple of questions from the chat. So someone asked, how did you decide what to keep and cut from the footage? How did you determine the structure of the film?
That's really helpful. I think Hendrix was really great in preparing me for that, and I used my Hendrix education more than after Hendrix. I went to UCLA for film school, but I still use my Hendrix education probably more than my UCLA film education,
Dang.
because what Hendrix taught, especially being an English major, was kind of how to structure your paper and how to structure kind of analysis of things. And they gave you all this deep literature to read and like the Western intellectual traditions books. And there was always this sense of structure coming from what you were reading as a student there. And I think liberal arts educations in general do a really good job at that. So when I was editing the film, I don't think I remember I initially did a quick little outline, but I think really what happened was I just kind of tossed it all in the computer, and then I put a long kind of because you couldn't make bins and stuff at the time, so I just like put out all of the footage, and then just went through and was like, okay, well, what's the moment from that day that was like the key moment, and what's
Mm.
the moment of the story where this happens, and then I just kind of started moving them around to kind of say, oh, well, it feels better here, and then I decided, oh, well, I need to explain that. What should I do? Voiceover, right? And so it was more or less experimentation, and that's also something I've found to be really helpful for uh, education, because I wasn't the best student in high school. Actually, when I got into Hendrix, I was on probation academically. Like they didn't think I was going to make it. Um, so I've not always been the most traditional academic learner. So being able to actually see something and use kind of being able to structure something visually and seeing the takes and being able to like get in the video files and with the video camera, it helped me become a better student, because then it also taught me when I'm interviewing John and Bobby, like how to research better, or when I'm editing something together, how to go find a resource and ask them how to fix this export. Or so I think these project-based learning initiatives, one of which filmmaking is, can also help spark different types of learning. So a lot of the kind of work of putting the story together and piecing it together came from trial and error, and just kind of allowing yourself to get in that sense of flow where you're just kind of in it and not really thinking about anything else, but does this make sense? Is the story compelling? And that's what I think is interesting about filmmaking and editing, is there is this kind of art form of the flow and kind of being in something and just kind of letting the footage dictate where it goes. That is, it's harder for me to find in other ways, like in writing per se. So I encourage people who are interested in kind of developing different story muscles to just edit something, and because it's a different process.
I want to try it so bad. Like editing is the aspect of filmmaking that I'm most interested in because I feel like it's so important, but it kind of gets relegated to the background.
Yeah, it's so important, and
Yeah.
it's an
I mean,
amazing
well,
journey.
it's essential, but yeah, like you said, the flow is very intriguing to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Kendricks was just really great at saying, okay, this is how you write a paper, like topic sentence and thesis and argument, and then break it down. And I think having a good sense of that and kind of and allowing yourself to learn that through Hendrix helps a lot with just storytelling.
Awesome. We have another question from the audience, talking about kind of the status of the Pink House currently. They say there have been several GoFundMe campaigns for the Pink House the last several years, in an effort to establish a museum and to avoid foreclosure. So they're asking if you know the status of the house now, and is Justin Rawls still there?
I don't actually. I meant to get in contact with Justin, and I haven't. I have his email now, so I need to email him.
I feel like
Because
I just, oh, sorry.
oh no, no,
I feel
just
like I
because.
just saw an article like recent that's somewhat recent that is saying that it is owned by someone now. It might be Justin,
Oh,
but
okay,
it's like a safe house for LGBTQ youth.
that'd be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think because I'd love. I mean, I don't know if the film is useful to them, but I'm happy to help. Maybe we can talk offline about it. But there's a few friends of mine have said, John, why don't you remaster it and like fix the audio, and we'll help you like update it, the titles. And I'd be happy to do that and maybe give the film to Justin to use for fundraising or whatever. So however I can help, I don't know the status, but however I could help, keep it up and running.
Let's see. We have. Oh, could you tell us about what you're working on now?
Yeah. I've been doing a couple different things. I guess the biggest thing has been this Tell Me a Memory series.
Mhm.
And similarly to this, and actually because of Pink Houses, shortly after making Pink Houses, well, I guess when I got into graduate school, I met a filmmaker named John Scagliotti, who's been doing this way longer than me. He's in his 70s now, and he did a film called Before Stonewall and another film called After Stonewall, which were really seminal films of kind of queer documentary and underrated. If you haven't seen them, they both won Emmys, I believe, and they're very important parts of queer history. And he interviewed some really heavy hitters. And so we chatted a lot, and he's been kind of my mentor going forward. And something I liked about his films and Pink Houses was just kind of this sense of documentation, and that you don't necessarily need to make this like Netflixy style documentary of, that you can really just sit people down and ask them about their lives and then patch it together over years and years and have this nice repository of people. So I started recently in I think 2018. I went to Memphis and interviewed 13 queer people there
Right.
in a very kind of informal way, and that's the Tell Me a Memory series. And currently we're trying to fund the one in Phoenix, Arizona, and
I
we're
used to love
trying.
it.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, we're trying to focus on places that aren't on the coast because there's a lot of repositories on the coast for queer
Right.
stories, and Phoenix is close enough to me and my DP. That's really one of the other reasons.
Yeah.
And so that's been the goal. Is just I want to set up in towns and ask people their experiences and continue to build a kind of archive for that. And then I'm also producing a couple other docs. We just finished one about a mining expedition in rural Peru, and we're hoping that comes out this year. It's a feature film about this mining expedition and a tragedy that kind of occurs during the mining. And that came from one of my other projects, which was a PBS show around geology. So that was something that I learned. I've been really excited about. And then there's a couple other projects. There's one where we're working with school, like getting material for schools on queer like queer history.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
my day job is I am a producer on site at Google, helping the learning and design team there. So making stories for them. And I'm
That's awesome.
sure there's something else that I'm forgetting, but
You have so
not
many things going on.
important.
That's great.
Yeah, that all sounds like super exciting. And the Tell Me a Memory series is great, by the way. And
Thanks.
I'll probably link it in the chat so people can check that out. It's really great.
So glad you're continuing that. That's really good.
It's been really fun, and it's and we have one last one that I haven't been able to make public because we're sending it out to a few more distributors, and then I'm going to start kind of trying to send it out more widely. So hopefully you'll see a few more posts on it. But it's a yeah, it's what I've enjoyed about it is I think for all of us who are creative and want to make stuff, it becomes so easy to prioritize other things, and these projects can feel so overwhelming. But I think one of the most useful things I learned at Hendrix was just that you can always find, if you design the project right, you can always find a way to continue to make stuff, and that it's really worth doing that. So if you're creative and want to do something, you can find a way to do it. It may not be the big dream that you had initially, but there's ways to stay creative and make things, and that can be just as fulfilling.
Totally.
Yeah, that's great. You said you currently work with Google, and we were kind of curious, like what is that like, and how do you navigate commercial projects and like other indie projects that you launch yourself?
Yeah, I think the best thing about working at a larger company is that for like clients that might have some funds is that you get to experiment with different technology and different tools, and it's a good way of kind of saying, oh, I really want to do a project where I get this kind of camera that I can move this way, or I can so in some ways it's a good place for you to play with new kind of film tools and get to that next level of your film kind of craft. But I also think there's filmmaking can be a real compromise, like all kind of art can be. And the independent projects, you can just like Tell Me a Memory and those things, I get to drive completely. Like I'm like, this is how I want to do it. I'm going this direction, no matter what, this is what I'm doing. And that's really fulfilling. And then there's something also fulfilling about having this team around you who are all really experts in what they're doing, and getting to collaborate with them and communicate kind of your idea and listen to their idea. And even though you may not have that same creative ownership that you'd have on your own project, once I started to learn like and how to keep my ego in check and say, oh, I can be a collaborator, I can listen to other people's ideas, and then you can do even bigger projects and work with even bigger crews, and you start really seeing that film is such a collaborative art form, and that and I think that's what larger budgets and larger organizations and some of that corporate client work can become. And there's another side to it with corporate client work, definitely, like there's some restrictions, but there's also all these amazing things you get to kind of collaborate with and work on and find ways to influence your creativity in different areas. And it's not always I'm the director, but sometimes it's like, oh, I can edit this, or I can help fill this in. And after you do enough of them, you can kind of start getting a sense of like where your specialty is in helping, and where you can put that in a project. So I'm all for, like, if anybody's like, oh, I want to take some corporate clients, or want to get out and work on some corporate stuff, it doesn't make you any less artistic. If anything, it helps you fine tune some of your craft. And for me, I think I paid a lot of money for film school, and a lot of that was making mistakes on my own films, and to learn. And I think when you have the chance to learn on other people's dimes and corporations' dimes, you should take it and feel like you can make those other things. And sooner or later, you'll become pretty good at it.
That's really good advice. I'm like deliberating whether I want to waste my money on film school or not.
I mean, there's definitely pluses and minuses, and I think for me, film school is really, really helpful. It helped me like fully come out. It helped. I have a great group of friends that I really cherish from that experience. So it is like all higher education. I think you kind of get what you put into it, and if you know your own agenda when you're going there, I think it can be really useful. But it's I'm still paying for it. So I have lots of student loan debt. There is that.
Yep, that happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad it was a worthwhile experience for you. That makes me feel better about considering it.
Yeah.
But I guess, do you have any other advice for current Hendrix students who aspire to be filmmakers or to just like
Totally.
work in the realm of film in general?
Yes. I think the thing that I liked the most about Hendrix, again, like I didn't know if I was going to college when I was in high school, but Hendrix kind of opened up some nice doors for me. And it was mostly that it taught me that being curious is okay and that you can, follow interests and passions, and they don't always have to be, you don't always have to know the big plan. Like that if you're curious and well intended, you can, you can have some success. And so I think at Hendrix, at least for me, there was always kind of a pressure that I had to become this lawyer. I had to become this doctor. I always had to know what my future was going to be. And I think Hendrix is such a great place to just for 4 years or how many years do you have left to kind of lean into your curiosities and like that people around you are all curious and excited about the things that they're learning, and that those experiences, the things that you're doing right now, are going to help you through any career, especially in filmmaking, because filmmaking is story based, but it's also people based. And in a school like Hendrix, where you get to know pretty much everybody at the school, it's very similar to navigating a film set. It's very similar to navigating a corporate environment. And if you're interested in becoming a filmmaker, there's a lot of resources now in Arkansas and on YouTube that I never had access to, and equipment that's really great. And you said you're going to show Tangerine, which was made essentially on an iPhone, a very decked out iPhone with very professional crew, but on an iPhone. And there's really no excuse not to just make stuff. And even at the higher graduate school level, like UCLA, the real the real thing I wish I had done was just make more stuff and not feel precious about it, and not worry if somebody was going to dislike it or like it or whatever. Just make a bunch of stuff. And if you're not wanting to make stuff, just be around other people who are making stuff and say, hey, I want to edit that or whatever it is. So my only advice would be like, even if they don't have a program for it, you can still do it. And there's plenty of us alumni who'd be interested in helping. There's also the Arkansas Cinema Society, which I'm one of the board members of, and I love that place. And they give so many, like, there's so many things there that I wish I had had access to that would have helped me uh, get where I wanted faster. So use that local resource. They're really a fantastic organization, and make sure to leverage that and just see good movies.
Yes. Speaking of good movies, I wanted to ask you, what was the last movie you saw that blew you away, or that you just like
Gosh,
really
that's a
loved?
good question. I don't watch nearly. I watch like really trashy television right now. I'm going. I'm going through like.
Or TV show. It doesn't matter.
I wish I had like a really intellectual answer, like, oh, this Truffaut film that I saw. No, but mostly I've been watching like, I watched a lot of. I did watch Bridgerton, which I thought was interesting. I will say, and not just because you have the poster of it, but the last movie I was like, oh my god, didn't see it coming, was definitely Parasite. And it made me kind of rethink the thriller genre, and all the stuff he does with class, I think, is really powerful. So I would say that was the last movie where I was like, didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
But there's also so many shows. I think it's like such a great time to watch television. So I've been watching a lot of TV. I
Yeah.
love Bridgerton. I may be the only like sappy guy in the world, but I thought Bridgerton was really solid. I still am listening to that Maroon 5 cover on the violin. I'm like, that's the greatest thing
I
ever.
haven't seen Bridgerton, but now I'm like
Yeah.
intrigued. I have to see
I
it.
I thought it was really nice to see period pieces where it's more inclusive, and it doesn't feel, it's not, it's just a fun show. It's not, there's no big overarching mission. It's just kind of a fun show that makes me feel excited to see kind of a more diverse actors and period costumes, and I liked it a lot for that reason. I also tried to be Shonda Rhimes' assistant when I lived in LA. I did not get it.
Oh, oh man.
I
I'm
tried
sure
so
you
hard.
were so close.
No, I was really far away. It didn't work.
No.
I was an assistant for a team across the hall from where she was putting up shop, and I kept going in and being like, hey, does anybody need an assistant in here? Can I be in the room? Can I be on any, like, and they never returned my call ever, 0 times they did. Yeah. But I think she did fine, so it worked out. Yeah.
Are there any shows or movies like that are somewhat recent that you really love that are like LGBTQ representation? You
That's a
know?
good question. I think one of the things that I love about being kind of a queer filmmaker, and at the beginning I kind of hated it when people call me that because I was like, I make all kinds of films, and why has it got to be queer only? Yeah. But but there is this amazing canon of filmmakers who are, because even when I was in graduate school, there were agents saying, "Don't make queer stuff. You're just gonna get bottled necked. You're never gonna get managed." And now, like, every show is, has a queer character. Um, but I've been looking back at kind of films from folks like Greg Araki and like the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, mostly the 90s really. But if you looked at like John Scagliotti's work on in documentary, where I've been more or less looking kind of backwards because there's been all these films that were never on my radar because it just wasn't, I wasn't in those circles, and they really only existed in kind of the coasts. So I've been really much more trying to like watch stuff I missed that are interesting time capsules. And but there's certainly a lot of new interesting films with queer characters in them. But I remember looking back at Weekend. I had a short in Frameline the same time Weekend that if you haven't seen the film, it's an interesting film called Weekend, came out. And he was and he went on to make the show Looking for HBO. I don't know if you ever saw that show, but people like that. It has the guy from it has the king from Hamilton in it. He's the lead in Looking. But anyway, so at the time there wasn't, Frameline had been existing for a long time, which is a queer film festival, the oldest queer film festival in the country. And I went there with a short, and I didn't really realize like there's so many films that have been telling queer stories for so long, and I just missed them. So I've been going kind of backwards and watching older queer stuff.
That's fun.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so glad that there's more representation of that community now today. I think it's really important. But we have another audience question. Someone asked, what if he could program a series of any films or media for the Hendrix community, what would you choose?
Oh yes. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Um, I don't know. There's so many interesting things, especially in Arkansas. I did see one of the things that was most impactful to me was it was a series in LA called the LA Rebellion with Killer Sheep and Billy Woodbury's film. What is it? What's Billy's film? Oh gosh. Anyway, there's sizable films from the LA film community, and it's largely a Black filmmaker led, and it's films that are super influential to almost all films that come after it, and kind of U.S. cinema, but they really were swept under the rug at the time. Like Daughters of the Dust is Julie Dash's Daughter of the Dust, and that was part of that movement. So I think if and that was something that I got to see in LA, and some of the filmmakers were present, and Charles Burnett with Killer Sheep has like influenced hundreds of films, and that's a film I think we need to see more of. So I would probably do kind of the LA Rebellion films because I think that there's just so much. And we were talking about people who are making films about not just centered on kind of the oppression or getting or activism, but just kind of poetic pieces of life without and just kind of really powerful narratives of just cultures that were kind of overlooked. I think the LA Rebellion is really important to see that. And on the East Coast, there, Spike Lee was doing his films. So there's some really amazing stuff from the 70s and 80s, and I think that for a long time we just never got to see minority films, and not just queer films, but all minority films. And seeing those, I try to highlight more of those because they really do influence a lot more of the mainstream films than we know, you know.
They do. Yeah. Those are great choices.
Like, yeah, I mean, movies are so much fun, and I would love. We should do like a playlist. Like, you should have anybody you bring on here, like, give us the playlist.
Yeah. Give us your movie list, I guess. Would be,
Yeah.
would be the thing.
But if you have a chance, check out just the LA Rebellion, and you'll find a handful of films that are really, really great.
So, I know I did watch Daughters of the Dust last year because we were trying to find films for our Black Representation Matters series.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I went down this rabbit hole of like the LA Rebellion, and I haven't seen as many as I would like to, but now I'm like, oh, we need to have a
Yeah.
series.
Philip Martin is an interesting choice, but Philip Martin used to teach a little bit about that. Philip Martin's a movie critic for the Gazette, but also Arkansas Cinema Society. It's been something we've tried to do and chatted about as well. So maybe we should make it a reality and show some of those movies.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I think they were some of my favorite. And just the camera, some of the things they do with cameras in that series or that section of films are just insane. It's so beautiful because at the time they were lugging around these crazy big cameras in really small like kitchen spaces. And Billy Woodbury's film, I can't remember the name, but he does this amazing like long take where he's going around the kitchen table and this couple's having this argument, and it's a fantastic scene. So and strangely, Billy was at UCLA. He was one of the professors at UCLA, and you know and even at UCLA, people were like, "Oh yeah, it's Billy," but nobody was like, "He made one of the most important films ever," you know. So,
Oh my god.
so it's so yeah, a lot of things are overlooked, and it's nice to go back and look at them.
That's wonderful. Well, we're out of questions to ask you, I think.
Thank you for having interest in this and watching the film. And if anybody ever wants to reach out, please feel free to share my email. And I'm always happy to help Hendrix folks. And congratulations on surviving a probably very different year of education. And I look forward to hearing all the good things that come.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. It was really a wonderful experience.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It means a lot, and Hendrix has always been a really good memory for me. So I'm happy to be involved.
Yes, thank you. It was great to talk with a filmmaker like firsthand, and this was kind of like our first experience like interviewing someone, and I think
You did a wonderful job. Both of you were really, and the questions from the audience, it was really nicely done. And I didn't feel stressed out. Usually I feel really stressed out of these things.
No stress here. No.
So thank you so much. And I would encourage you all to look at the Arkansas Cinema Society because they do some really wonderful. It's quite an amazing thing. So check them out. Well, thank you. And again, email me any questions. Anybody in the audience has any questions, feel free to send me an email, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank
Take
you all
care.
for watching.
Have a great day or night, I guess.
Night, yes.
Bye.
Farewell.
Take care.